Cool, thank you so much. What a day. It's really late, but what a wonderful lineup. So many fascinating talks. I'm so happy that I can contribute a few words to it. The title of the talk is Seizing the Means of Communication, but of course we're not seizing anything. We're non-violent people, we're peaceful people, so we are, creating alternative means of communication, or maybe we're creating cooperative means of communication. Super brief introduction. I am Harry. I am from Berlin, but I live in Bavaria with this little creature. I'm mostly active on the Fediverse on PixelFed, where I post Game Boy camera photos every day. You can see on the right, if you really pay close attention, that yesterday was my Fediversary. It's been 9 years on Mastodon. Thank you so much. We don't have time. I also run a book club for almost a decade, and I work at a little worker-owned studio where we work with clients, for example, the Sovereign Tech Agency or the Prototype Fund. Today, I get to talk about two of my absolute most favorite topics, the Fediverse and cooperatives. And you're all at least familiar with one already, which is great. So, the Fediverse, as community-driven social media, this is not a term that I came up with. I took this from a newsletter from the Mastodon team that they sent in September, and you don't have to read all of it. I pulled out the three headlines where they say they believe in user agency, in community sovereignty, and in sustainable funding. And it almost reads like a manifest for the Fediverse as a whole. So really cool. We're going to get back to that. Earlier this year in summer, I was lucky to attend a workshop from a few members of the Mastodon team, Johannes and Zora, at Publix in Berlin, which is a house for journalism and democracy. And it was really fun to watch them educate a room larger than this, probably twice as many people, from journalism and media to create Fediverse accounts and basically give them an introduction and explain why this is important. But of course, they did a wonderful job, but there was a bit of a stumbling block in this session. Any guesses what that might have been, where people got confused? Correct. So at some point, the instruction was, now you have to choose an instance, and that's where a lot of people got confused, and it became really clear. I think a lot of people in this room are technologists, so we have a mental model for these things. We think of email, like it was mentioned before, and we understand what a protocol is and what apps are, but for a lot of people who are not technologists, this stuff is hard. And I kept thinking about this. And I decided to come up with a bit of a mental model for this and put it on some slides. Like for a lot of you, this will be familiar, and I hope, well, we'll see what happens. So basically, I came up with 3 different types of instances. This is pretty basic stuff. There's the flagship instance, which has millions of accounts, which is run in the Mastodon example by the Mastodon team themselves. Then there is a sprawling network of indie communities. We've heard from a couple today. They're very diverse, where often volunteers contribute their energy, their time, their personal funds to host communities for people that like the vibe or associate something with that. So absolutely wonderful phenomenon that's only really possible on the Fediverse. And then, of course, you can self-host the software, where it's usually just yourself on the instance, or maybe even a couple of other people. And please don't take this too scientifically. Like, every option is wonderful, but I try to understand the trade-offs a little bit. So when you sign up for the flagship instance, obviously very stable, the people know what they're doing, the funding is hopefully secured, you can be sure that it's going to be around for a while, but you're not really, if you sign up on the flagship instance, you're not really contributing to the diversity, to the decentralization of the network, right? We don't want the flagship instance to become too big, because then we replicate the centralization in big tech. And do you have agency, for example, to participate in moderation decisions? Not really, like it's just too many accounts on there. Then you get indie instances where we have a big range of options, right? There are small ones, bigger ones, that run really participatory in ways where you can influence moderation decisions. But often the future of these is a bit uncertain. You set up your home on the internet and you contribute a lot of posts, you make this your identity, but then sometimes these go away. And this happens, right? So, for example, Mozilla famously shut down their system after a while and left a couple of people stranded. You can migrate your account, but still, it's you can't take your posts with you. Also, the biggest German instance with the wonderful name Tröd Café was threatened to be shut down, but then luckily taken over by someone else. So if you choose an indie instance, you put faith in the people running it. And then when you self-host, of course, this is technically quite hard, but then you're in full control. But maybe, beyond these three, there is another way to do this, and maybe it's a cooperative way. And we're going to get into that in a second. But before we do that, we have to clarify what the heck is a cooperative, because probably not everyone knows. Quick show of hands, who is a member of a cooperative in this room? Okay, that's almost a third. Yes, you're my people, fantastic. So I hope this is not too boring for you. A cooperative is a type of company that has collective ownership and democratic governance. So it's a type of company, unlike most other companies, that's collectively owned by people who become members, and every one of these people has one voice when it comes to decision making. So more money, buying more shares, doesn't give you more influence. It's fundamentally democratic. One person, one voice. And the goal of this company is not to turn a profit, it is to support the members. Cool. That was pretty abstract. Let's look at some examples. So this is a newspaper in Germany owned by 25,000 readers. It's not owned by corporations. It's just accountable to the readers who own the newspaper. This is a platform co-op building a Bandcamp alternative, and it's owned by tens of thousands of musicians and listeners. This is a decentralized energy provider, which is also cooperative and owned by all the people who consume the energy. Cooperatives are big in agriculture. The co-op, some of you might be familiar with, the supermarket is owned by everyone who becomes a member. This is not a loyalty program. It gives you actual ownership in the enterprise. There are banks, which are owned by all of the account holders. There is cooperative infrastructure, like the host sharing cooperative. And if the clicker works, there's also manufacturing co-ops, for example, this bike manufacturer, where all of the workers own the company collectively and produce these bikes, super cool. And I also happen to work one, which is called Village One, and it has just 6 people, but we own this company together. Fantastic. All of the cooperatives have a common set of values. Imagine this, a type of company that has a shared value system. So it's about voluntary membership, it's about democratic control, education and training, autonomy and independence, cooperation, and a concern for community. Incredible. This is the marriage of activism and business. We always think of these things as separate, but this is like there's a Venn diagram, and in the middle, the overlap, that's cooperatives. We're going to get back to these values if we have enough time. And cooperatives are really everywhere, like I said, in a lot of these fields. But why not also on social media? And this is where we finally get to the point of social media cooperatives. There are a couple. This is not a theoretical concept. These are mostly Mastodon instances. So there's cosocial.ca, which is a Canadian instance and is owned by all of the people who have accounts there and democratically governed. There's also Social Co-op, which I believe is the oldest one and the first one, which is the same. And then there's also data.coop, which is Danish, and they provide even different services, not just Mastodon, but also a CodeForge and Matrix, a Matrix instance. So these things do exist, but there are not that many. And if we attach this to our little mental model, which is not definitive, you're free to fill this out differently for yourself. This is just my impression. Then a cooperative instance is probably mostly smaller because we want to give people a say in the governance. It's often members only, so the sign-up is a bit more complicated, and often it also costs money. And the stability varies depending on the technical sophistication of the maintainers. But the future-proofness, the funding, the decentralization, giving people agency, that's all in pretty good hands in cooperatives. And I feel like almost that this concept gets closest to these goals of giving users agency, both how the service is designed, but also where they set up their accounts, and creating sovereign communities and organizing for sustainable funding, because it's not put up by a volunteer and then the thing gets more expensive and more popular and then somebody's struggling for funds. But from the very start, it tells members, hey, if you have an account here, you need to pay and contribute money. So the funding mechanism is built in. And if we look at these values, then basically these apply pretty much one-to-one to the Fediverse as well. So if we look at this through a lens of social media, then we also want voluntary and open membership on the Fediverse. We don't want to trap anyone or manipulate people like big tech does. We want to involve people and give people agency. The economic participation, I don't know. If an instance gets really popular and produces merch and turns a profit, then it could feed back to the members who have accounts there. But this is, I guess, mostly theoretical. The Fediverse is totally about autonomy and independence, about education and training, about learning from each other, about cooperation. This whole network is one exercise in cooperation, where instances work together to form a larger network, just like cooperatives do in the larger economy. And a concern for community is pretty much a given, because we're talking about community software. So, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had added to the sprawling ecosystem in the Fediverse that we already have of single user instances that people self-host and the flagship instances and different services, also a couple more cooperative instances where people co-own and maintain their instance together. This is where the talk could end, but I had another thought. So even if we create many of these social media cooperatives like I just outlined, how do people find them? Like, if we bring more cooperatives to the Fediverse, wouldn't we just reshuffle people who are already on the Fediverse? Like, how do we get new people in there? So maybe we actually need to meet people where they are. As technologists, we have the skills to do that. So what if we're not actually talking about a social media co-op, but rather as a social co-op with software? Online and offline. And there are probably cooperatives all around you. And some of them probably have physical spaces. Maybe they have community spaces. Maybe there's stuff like social clubs. Maybe there's a worker-owned cafe or a library, or you can organize something at your university. There are often social structures around you, and some of them might be formal cooperatives, and some of them might just operate like a cooperative, but you can go into these places, you can find them, which are in your vicinity, and go in there and see if maybe the organizers have a desire to also offer social media accounts to their members. So maybe this is something where these cooperatives, which are predominantly local, could also extend into the digital realm. And you could host onboarding sessions to bring new people into the Fediverse and just broaden the scope of this and liberate more people from big tech. There's a ton of tangents that we could talk about if we had more time, like how do you start a cooperative, financial considerations, the downsides. This was, of course, a very rosy talk. There are real-life struggles with cooperatives. We could have talked about examples of successful platform co-ops. For example, earlier today, the Bonfire people, they also see themselves as a cooperative, they told me yesterday. And there's a ton of other co-ops active on the Fediverse, like Autonomic or the co-op cloud infrastructure. So I've never seen this much cooperative activity anywhere else, and it's absolutely wonderful. So if you want to continue the conversation, I'm going to make this really easy. All of the motifs you see there are stickers that I have with me. So if you want a sticker, just come talk to me afterwards and continue the conversation, and we can talk about all of these things. Or you can find me via email or Mastodon or on my website on the internet. And this is where I leave you. Sorry. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to leave it there for a second. I should have put a QR code, sorry. Yeah, and that's basically it. Keep dreaming, join a cooperative, and see you on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for an amazing talk, Harry. I mean, talking in that speed, but still be on point content-wise. Very much respect for that.
It's like a podcast on 1.5.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much. Also, your last point, I think, is maybe it's also an act of solidarity you have here on your jumper, right? It's amazing, really good. Yes, we have 30 seconds.
What are cooperatives that do non-social media work who have a social media instance? Are there any?
Not really. I mean, some universities host servers for their students, and the host-sharing cooperative that I showed, they create collectively owned infrastructure, but they also run a Mastodon instance under geno.social for their members, which is sort of a sideshow. It's not their main business, it's just something that they also have. you.